Deep in an underground secret Pacific Island lair, Pop Culture Minefield presents Saturday Morning Funtime. This is the Comic Relief Crusader telling you to get your morning cereal ready, because here we go.
That's some classic stuff right there. As I always say, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, but you know what? It's Saturday morning somewhere. So that's our show, Saturday Morning Fun Time. And our special guest today, of course, is Tom Cook, or Thomas Cook, as he's called some places.
Yeah, usually just Tom.
Hey.
But Tom, it's good to see you again, man. This is the second time we've had you on, and it's an honor. And Keith and I were like going, let's do this. Let's do it. Pull the string. Let's do it. Get Tom back on. Very excited to have you here, man. And I'm hopefully going to be giving you some good questions today from the whole group. Introduce everybody on the panel, of course, is Keith, my partner in crime over on the far right.
Hello.
And right below you there, that bald guy, Tom,
Yeah.
that's Brian from Scotland.
Pleasure to meet you, Tom. How are you? I grew up, well, I say grew up, I was 10, 12, 13 when I started watching the stuff you worked on. So, you know, basically we pretty much grew up watching it. I'm that old. I watched it the first time around.
So you're from Scotland, eh?
I am from Scotland, but I live in Canada. But
My mother's maiden name was Mackenzie.
Mackenzie.
Mac.
I got a bit
All
of
the Macs.
with me too.
The Mackenzies.
I will tell you, though, that Canada is the Scotland of the United States.
It is.
Stop
it.
it.
Is.
Stop it.
But Tom, I'm glad to see that you're in soft focus today. I think we should all be like that. It does make us all look, hence the blemishes.
I'm glad that we got this resolved, and thank you again, Shanatsky, for walking him through.
Here's what it is that I've got this really crappy camera. That's why I bought this thing probably 10 years ago and happened to stumble upon it while we were doing all this. I said, well, I'll give this a try, and at least it works.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, once again, we're just very happy to have you here. And of course, the gentleman that helped you through it, of course, is our good friend Shanatsky. Shanatsky, are you here yet?
Yes, I'm here. I was just waiting for you to shut up. That's all.
But you've got a long wait.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost Shanatsky.
Oh, God, he's gone.
Wow.
You criticize the boss, this is what happens.
They criticize me all the time, Tom.
Hey, you have the variant tells me to go fuck myself.
Yeah, I know. This you'll enjoy this one. Where's it at? Get the banner up, dude. Where's that banner at, Martin?
Here it
on
comes.
Here it is.
Oh,
there it is.
Oh, here it is.
That is just for Shanatsky, Tom. He's the only person that has a banner made just for him.
Yeah,
Wow.
that banner spores.
And of course, I don't know if you met him last time or not, but Martin is our show manager. And Martin is from Venezuela by means of Mexico.
Oh.
Yeah,
so he still hasn't made it far enough north into America.
Wow.
Martin and I have got you surrounded from the north.
I know, surrounded. But anyway, Tom, I know that Keith and everybody has some questions for you, but I'd like to ask just a couple right off the top.
Sure.
When did you decide or realize that you wanted to work in animation and as an artist?
Well, it's always a weird question because I never really decided that I wanted to work in animation.
But as an artist, were you gifted? No.
I was a young boy, loved Spider-Man when I was a kid. So I liked to draw like Steve Ditko did, that really good spidery looking Spider-Man. And so then I got into comic books, and I was, kind of copying Jack Kirby's style and whoever was really popular at the time. And just for fun, because I loved it so much. But, fast forward to like 1975, I was a transit bus driver in Los Angeles. And one day it was my day off, I believe. And I went out and got the mail, and it was a bunch of junk mail. I threw it on my kitchen table, made a sandwich, and I sat down to eat. and saw this little pamphlet amongst all the mail, and started flipping through the pamphlet just to do something while I was eating. And I saw this class that was going to be offered at Cal State Northridge in comic book art. And being a longtime comic book fan, I thought, man, I'd like to take that and learn more about comic books and how they're made. And I noticed the teacher name was Don Rico. And Don Rico is somebody who drew Captain America and the Daredevil that was kind of half red and half black back in the 50s. And so I really wanted to meet him. I'd really never met a comic book artist before in person. So I took this class and brought in my portfolio, which was all my superhero drawings I'd done over the years. And it ends up that Don Rico was a storyboard artist at Hanna-Barbera. And he said, look, I really like your superhero art. We're doing a show called Challenge of the Super Friends. And if you're interested, I could recommend you to a class that they hold at the studio to learn basic animation skills. And sometimes they hire you out of the class. And so I was just like, whoa, yes, of course, I'd love to do that. So every Thursday night, I went over to this class, and it lasted a whole 3 weeks before they hired me out of the class. So that's why, having this lifelong dream of being an animator, I really never thought about it before, and I just kind of fell into it.
Did you have artistic skills when you were younger, or you just learned?
Well, no, I can remember like in third and fourth grade, there were a couple of people that could draw, and we formed this little cartoon club and made up our own little comic strips and stuff like that. So, I mean, I was always like better than the normal guy, but I never thought of myself as ever wanting to pursue that,
Right.
And so that's why when it happened, it was like, it happened so fast. And having only 3 weeks in that class, when they hired me, it was like, I was panicking because I had this great bus driver job that was making like, 16, 17 bucks an hour back in the 70s, which was big time money. And all of a sudden I was going to have to kind of quit that and get into something that I didn't even know if I could do it. I barely knew what an in-between was. And here I was going to go into working production, full production.
Well, when you say in between, do you mean tweening?
Yeah. Well, that's the proper
where
term.
it comes from, the derivation. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's literally, you put one piece of paper down with the drawing on it, put the other one on top of it, and then flip a light on, and you can see through the two pieces of paper, and you literally draw right between the other two lines for the whole thing so that it eventually will move, across the screen.
That's because I wanted to get into animation myself. Yeah. And I got an offer from Disney to go to work for them. But when I saw what they wanted me to do, I'm like, oh, F that. I'm not doing that. They were going to hire me as an eraser.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I'm already doing comic books. No, I'm not going to walk away from doing that.
I don't think it'll like Disney anyway. It was really...
it's a machine is what I was told.
But it was very political. And see, working at Filmation or Hanna-Barbera, it was a lot of fun. We had a good time. We could, we pulled pranks on people. At Disney, it was like, I don't know. It just seemed like nobody that worked at Disney felt like they were having any fun. It was all just work.
It was like a machine.
Yeah, exactly.
And you get to work on really nice things. I mean, I would have loved to work there from the aspect of being able to work on real quality animation, but they didn't pay as well either. So it's like, I'd rather just stay where I was and work on the TV shows and learn my craft to eventually work at a studio that did work for Disney. So
I get paid better. Right.
So I got to work on some of the Disney products without having to work at the studio.
That's a smart way to do it, Tom. When it comes down to it, though, you were hired right out of school before you even finished?
Oh, no, I wasn't in school at all. I was working just as a bus driver. So,
was this in New York, Tom? Or like
upstate New York? In California.
In California, sorry.
Yeah, because I had moved from New York to California in 1968, so I was like 16 years old.
Okay.
My dad was an airline pilot for Trans World Airlines and got tired of flying home at 3 a.m. and having to deal with the snow and all that in New York. So he moved us out to LA, and I really didn't want to move. I'd lived in that same house my whole life, and all of a sudden I'm moving 3,000 miles away. But it ended up, I liked it. It was a pretty nice place to live when I moved there. And of course, without moving to LA, I never would have gotten into this business. So I was, everything just seemed to line up just right for me. Not even applying for a job and getting a job is pretty amazing.
It is. Oh.
So
Sorry, that was Keith. I unmuted him for a second because he was having some trouble. But,
yeah. So, what were some of the, if you don't mind me asking a question, Gary, Tom,
Go
what
for
were
it.
some of those Disney properties you were working on before you decided you didn't want to stay there for too long?
Well, I worked at a company. This was later on. This was about 1989, 1990.
Okay.
Oh, this is after Filmation.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. I thought maybe there had been something before that. My
No.
apologies.
I started straight at Hanna-Barbera.
Okay.
How scary was that for you, Tom, when they closed their doors?
At Filmation? I mean, it was horrible because
Yeah, because there was no other American studios, really.
Yeah, that was the last studio left, and me and the two guys that I sat with when we worked on He-Man are named Mike Toth and Carl Hall, and they became my best friends, and that was it. I mean, we didn't have anywhere else to work, so me and Mike went over to MTM Studios. The Mary Tyler Moore used to be owned by Desi Lou. And went over there just to get a job, even just sweeping up, so we get some money so we could at least pay bills. And we kind of had to sneak onto the set. We noticed they weren't checking badges, so we just got a couple of brown bags and pretended we were coming back from lunch and just kind of waved to the security guards, and they let us go. So we went walking through and met one of the guys that worked at Filmation. We knew he was working there, so that's why we went over there. And there he was, and he said, hey, you guys work over at that studio across the street. And he pointed to this big building, and I go, what studio? And he said, that's a guy that worked at Disney, started his own studio called Bear Animation, Baer. That was his last name, Dale Bear. And so I kind of looked at Mike, and Mike looked at me, and we said, we didn't even know there was a studio over there. And he said, well, yeah. And actually they're hiring right now if you're, so we went running over there right away and went in, and next day we were working on Roger Rabbit, the tummy trouble short.
Oh, man.
So I thought I would never work in the business again. And next thing you know, I'm picked up by an even better company because now you're working on really quality stuff. And it was fun. We got the fun part. It was a very small studio. So, I was one of the first animators they hired, and Mike was the second. And then they hired a few assistants. So during the time that I worked there, I painted some cells. I mean, I did all sorts of stuff because it was so small that when there was a rush, everybody got to do everything. And that was my last experience in the animation business. Once that disappeared, I did a little bit of freelancing when I was directing, but in 1990, I moved up to Seattle, and everything I did from that point was all just done through the mail, FedEx. They'd FedEx me this stuff.
That's crazy. And you know what? I know how competitive it is like today to work in the animation or even art field, because there's just billions of artists now.
Yeah.
But when you were coming up, and started working, it was a much smaller universe. Was there a sense of competitiveness, or did you guys just feel like you were safe doing what you were doing while you were doing it, like with Filmation?
Yeah, I don't think there was a huge competition between the people that worked there. Especially when we were working, we were just busy working. We didn't really care about the other guy and what he was doing. But I think one of the big things today, that one of the problems, if you want to call it a problem, is that with all this computer stuff, a lot of people that can't draw can manipulate stuff to make it look like they can draw.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
it's kind of like with music, where there's people that can't sing and can't play an instrument, but they just let the computer fix it.
Yeah.
And Britney Spears. And
Britney.
you end up being this multimillionaire, and you really don't have the talent of anybody that should be making that kind of money.
So, how do you feel about all the AI stuff that's coming up? Because I've already seen examples where they're literally taking like video and they're fitting it into basically like ape a style.
Oh, it's
Like,
worse than
or-
that,
had
Shinatsky.
one.
You got that whole intro for Invasion, Secret Invasion, is done through AI. Nobody, like all the great artists that worked on the Avengers and the Secret Wars, all of from Marvel. I can't believe they did that. That they had a machine do it.
Yeah. It's all about just saving money, and one of the things, and this is something it's been a bug up my rear for a long time, is the fact that comic books have changed so much from being comic books to being almost photographs in a book. It's just gotten too realistic. I want my comics to look like a comic. If you're going to do a movie, do a movie. If you're going to do an animated, do animation.
Oh my God. You are speaking my heart on that, man.
Yeah, because what it does is you've taken all the genres and just squished them into one, so that there's nothing that's different that you can look at. All the comic books are colored in computer now, so that everything has a shine to it. Everybody puts highlights on everything. Now, look, my shirt is dark over here and it's light over here, but it's not shiny.
Yeah, there's no shine on it.
It's not like a piece of plastic. And there's a little shine on my
Or
bowl.
like Brian's head.
This I spend hours every day polishing this. This is not an accident,
But still, it looks like flesh. It doesn't look like plastic. The stuff in a comic book looks like plastic.
Touch wood.
Well, that shit started back in the 90s, Tom, with Heroic Age Comics was one of the first ones. They hired me, but then I ended up not going to work for them because I didn't just want to color comic books. I wanted to draw. And but they started the trend, and there are two other major companies that work for the comic companies, and you get in there and you do Photoshop. And I'm a master at Photoshop. I've done a lot of comic book coloring, but I tend to only put shine on things that are supposed to be shiny.
Right.
So I get you on that. But AI in particular, and the advent of today, because first animation changed, because I went to film school. I learned how to do traditional animation. And when I do it, I still do it the traditional way, frame by frame.
Mm-hmm.
But there's software out there now that first started with Flash, because Flash was a cheap, quick way of doing animation.
Yeah.
They did Frisky Dingo and other shows like that in the early 2000s. Remember that shit, Brian?
We did a show called Superhero Roommate.
Oh my God.
The internet, and it was also done in Flash. And
yep.
I got hired because the guy that ran the company didn't know anything about film.
There's no tweeting in that, is there?
No. So he said, I need to find somebody. He'd already made an agreement at $20,000 an episode for this show, and had nobody that could do it. So he kind of contacted me in desperation. And I didn't know Flash. We were working in Apple, which I never worked in Apple before. So it was kind of a rush to learn it. But, it was what it was. It was kind of basically paper cutout animation, where you just took the different symbols and just moved them, So I had a crew that would set up each scene, and then I'd put it together and animate it. But it was just animated pretty crudely. But the idea was the story was supposed to be the big seller, and that simply, a lot like Simpsons or Beavis and Butthead. The animation sucks. It's just, it's the content of the story that made that a good show or bad, depending on what you
And
think.
it really did kind of change the landscape of animation for television, because the Flash animation is what led to how they do Archer today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They use an actual program, and this started with South Park. They took the same software that they did Jurassic Park with, the 3D environment, and they started putting the animated cell by cell animation into it, frame by frame animation. It was like a mixture of Flash meets traditional meets 3D, and everything just sort of changed for doing animation
Yeah.
for guys like you that learned how to do it on a plate, and you had layers, and now it's a completely different ball game. How did that feel?
Well, I mean, everything changes. I mean, that's one of the things you got to kind of get used to in any business. Right now the actors are complaining about the streaming and that they're not making. Well, find a way to use streaming because it ain't going away.
Yep.
And we had the same problem. It's it's just difficult because everything is changing so much faster now. I mean, animation was done from the early 1900s through almost 1990 without any computer. And now all of a sudden it's gone, Flash, 3D, different softwares, Maya, Softimage. It keeps changing. There's new programs that come out. And the difficulty I had was that for my 50 years, it was like an exposure sheet was an exposure sheet, and in between was an in between. And then all of a sudden these programs come out and they change all the terminology because they want it to be proprietary to their program.
Right.
So then you get the new program and you delve into it and you can't figure it out because everything's named differently. So if they just leave it the way it was to begin with, an exposure sheet's an exposure sheet, and just leave it as that, everybody could have picked it up really fast. But every time I changed formats, there was a big learning curve.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of like in coding, because I learned how to write HTML back in the 90s. And then in the 2000s, web development changed, and I had to learn, I had to make a decision, PHP or Cold Fusion.
Mm.
And then I went and I read Cold Fusion. I'm like, fuck that.
Mhm.
You got to have a degree in physics to understand Cold Fusion.
Yeah.
PHP was just a little more advanced. It's dynamic HTML. And but it's because of the fact that back in the 90s when I was in college, I saw what was going to happen with the internet. And just like you said, you've got to be ready to roll with the punches. I learned Flash. Even though I went to film school to learn how to do traditional animation, I learned Flash because I saw that was coming early on.
Right.
And these changes, they came on and they came on hard. And like I said, some people have tried. You can't stop progress. We have crazy people, who try to stop progress. And I can tell Brian wants to react to this right now.
Well, Tom, you made some great analogies there with the development of music over the last few decades, where you've gone from analog to digital, and now programs where people can just, with no talent, can create entire music, usually corporate music, corporate controlled music. When you look at some current animation, are you still able to say, well, that's made by somebody with some real talent, regardless of the way it's being produced? Or is it harder to tell now who's got the talent and who hasn't got the talent?
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah, it's a tough one in music, but you can usually tell. You can say, that sounds like corporate, slick, shiny, produced.
Yeah.
This still sounds real.
I think you can kind of tell, but it's getting, as we progress, the line starts to get blurred more and more. So it gets more difficult. I mean, I think early on you could really tell when people were cheating. And Flash, of course, that was one that you really had to cheat because you had to use the same symbol for the body over and over and over. So you couldn't really.
You're cutting out pieces and animate it. Yeah.
And even in commercials, like there's a commercial with Skeletor, and he at the end takes off in this rocket, and you can see that all they're doing is taking the same drawing and just moving it up as he flies off. Whereas we would have had to redraw that, 20 times to get them off the screen. And so just in redrawing it, it makes it look a little bit more alive because it's not just the exact same lines moving. And it gives it some sort of form and a little bit of movement there. So it's really difficult to see anything that's animated fully anymore, where if a character is gonna be, let's see if I can get this, if he jumps up and then comes down, that's going to be like, maybe 30 drawings to get him to do that, to anticipate down, to go up, and then to land and cushion when he lands. They just use one drawing to go down, the same drawing all the way up, then do a flip drawing and then a drawing to go down, and then he lands and there's maybe one drawing and it pops back up, because they don't really care anymore whether it looks realistic. They're just trying to get the point across that he's jumping. And, I can understand that, but as an animator, you just hate to see that. You want to see something really look smooth and with overlapping action, and you just don't get that in any of the animation today.
Well, it reminds me of because I'm a student of Drew Struzan when it came to artwork, and he taught me a lot. And I'm assuming you know who Drew is.
Oh, yeah.
And Drew, just was so kind, teaching me everything. But then he had that attitude of like, what's the point? Because I was there when he retired, and I know why he retired. And it's because of Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers didn't see the value in poster artists anymore, because they could hire anybody with Photoshop to do a DVD cover or poster.
Absolutely.
And it killed
the
existence of movie posters for a while. Now you see movie posters, they're specialty items. You don't see them released with the film usually. They're done by Gickley and all that stuff. They'll do these art prints and sell them based on the movie, but they're not for the movie when they do the promotion like it used to be.
Oh, you used to get some brilliantly drawn posters for movies, like in some of the Canon films.
Brown was like the greatest. Yeah. He was all the way back to the 30s.
The artwork.
That guy was Creature from the Black Lagoon, the 10 Commandments.
I know, and you prefer these to actual shots from the movie. To me, they promote the movie far better when you see that beautiful artwork.
You get a better mood with artwork. And going
Hammer
back into
horror stuff.
But
brilliant work.
The thing is, does that make the movie better or worse just because it's got a good?
Well, because I do movie posters, and it's been said time and time again about my movie posters. The poster was better than the film.
Yeah, but it does increase and enhance your overall perception of the movie and how you remember it, I think.
Well, you're helping to sell it, yeah.
Yeah, so because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Sorry, Shinotsky, you go ahead. But I did want to talk about the role of if the animation is the greatest in the world, can that pull up a property that isn't well written or thought out in the first place? But, Shinotsky, sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, Shinotsky, you had a question.
Let's see. General with thing, what of like a lot of the stuff you did, like was, I guess, the best job, like everything just worked out perfectly, or at least as, if you had this particular experience with this project on everything, it would have been, best career ever kind of deal.
So what was my favorite project, kind of?
Yeah, what was to work on may not necessarily be, because there's being proud of what was produced, and then there's just the experience of making
the happy experience. Yeah,
right,
which was the happiest experience.
Yeah, I think that was probably. It's a toss-up between He-Man at Filmation, or when I worked at that Bear Animation Studio, because that was truly a small enough studio that you felt, rather than just being a cog in the wheel, you were an important part of that team, so that's, and Dale just naturally was a super nice guy and incredibly talented. I mean, he was one of the best animators I'd ever met. And, sadly, he just passed away about a year ago. He was only 70 years old. But that was the situation where I think there was less stress than at Filmation. The stress was we had to do a show a week, and that was a lot of work. And so
how far ahead were you guys?
Well, we had to get the whole season done by September, and we started the year before. So we started like September of 82 in order to hit the deadlines September of 83. Of course, that's 40 years ago. This is the 40th anniversary this year of He-Man. September something was the first day He-Man was shown. But when it started out, we had no idea that this was going to be 65 episodes. You know, usually a season is 13 episodes and you show it a couple times in reruns and that's your season. And this was going to be done Monday through Friday. So we had 5 days a week instead of just Saturday morning. So we had to do 65 episodes. And of course, there's only 52 weeks in a year. So that's more than an episode a week. And when we first started out, we were doing all the stock scenes where the character was going to run through and it was going to be shown over and over. But we had no idea it was going to be that big. So
I think I've seen, Tom, that you in other interviews you've spoken about, you know, enjoying doing something like Thundar.
Well, that was my favorite show as far as the content and just the idea of the show. I thought was really good.
Oh, I like that one because I like post-apocalyptic things.
Exactly,
So
that was
it
really
appeals to me.
cool. It was written for a little bit older people, you know, older kids. He-Man was done for 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds.
And I would have been like about 19 when that was out, and I still enjoyed it thoroughly. You know, it was something I really
I was about
liked.
the same age with a kid, and my kid watched the show, so I watched it with him. Which was fun.
Are you a big Conan fan then? Because the two projects are very Conan-like.
You know, I liked Conan the comic book, but I didn't care for the movies. It seems like whenever they take a comic book and make it a movie, they manage to screw it up.
No.
I hate to tell you this, you know, it's no secret, but there have been very few that I've really gone to and said, wow, that was done well.
I will say that I liked the 82 Conan, even though they changed a lot. What I hated was the version with Jason Momoa. I thought he was perfect. He was born to play Conan. But it was just like, I made fun of it by saying it was like a bunch of 12-year-olds wanted to write what they thought grown warriors talk about.
It was dull. It was actually dull, which is the worst crime.
Well, you got Jason Momoa on a horseback walking around talking like he's a 16-year-old girl on prom night, just won't shut up. And I'm like, what are you doing? Conan is a man of few words. But hey, we've hit
the violence.
I've hit the
things. They cast them. They cast a star in the spot instead of somebody new that could actually
an unknown
their own, and that's what I like. I don't want to see. I didn't really want to see Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan. It just, he had the body for it, but gosh. He really wasn't that great an actor when he started.
He's a terrible actor,
and the terrible voice that it, here's the word. It was terrible.
Drive your women.
I don't have the tongue for it.
Something about driving the women before me. I don't know.
Hey, we're at the half-hour mark, and I do have to say our greetings to the chat. Our Muslim uncle is here. Enema Confusa, love of my life, is here. E. Clay Thomason. Let's see who else is here. Boosh McFadden. Of course, our good friend, the Comic Relief Crusader, who's the voice you heard at the beginning of the show doing the announcer like Ted Knight. Penny is here. Slasher Fred. FKHC 2005, a.k.a. Tim. Brandon, the anime guy. He's already left, but we love Brandon. Veritex is here. Cam's Crash Courses. The Peter Vinkman fan site, a.k.a. Vinkman's Girl, is here. Keely Chow. All of these folks are good friends to this channel. And I think, did we have some questions, Martin, for Tom?
Yes.
From the chat?
First we have this super chat.
We have $1.99 super chat. Thanks for all the great shows as a kid, especially Godzilla. There you go. That's from our Muslim uncle for $1.99. That is directed at you, Tom. So thank you for Godzilla. Godzilla.
I was really shocked when I found out how popular Godzilla was. When we were doing it, we did it kind of quickly, and it just kind of went into the past, and we moved on to more Scooby-Doo. But I get a lot of comments about Godzilla and sell a lot of prints of Godzilla at the shows that I do.
I don't doubt it. But the cartoon also led to confusion within the fan base because the cartoons, his son's name was Godzuki.
Right.
Whereas in the films, it was Mia or something like that.
Minya.
And did you guys ever talk about that?
No, I mean, the Hanna-Barbera, formula was to have somebody with a sidekick. And so they just naturally made the funny little sidekick Godzuki for him there. The thing about Godzilla is I also directed in the early 90s the Godzilla cartoon that was based on the movie.
Right.
I did about 4 or 5 episodes of that. So I've got Godzilla in 2 different spots of my my career.
I always like shooting Ghostbusters. Just the goth
real
chick,
Ghostbusters.
and
Yeah.
she, Kylie is a character that means a lot to me.
Now the Filmation's Ghostbusters, of course, was the original Ghostbusters, and we sold the name Ghostbusters to Dan Aykroyd so he could make his movie. So that was a bit of confusion back in the day.
Because Filmation did the live action one with Larry Storch and
Forrest Tucker.
And what's his name? Oh my God, I just forgot his name. The guy that's in the costume. Oh my God, I'm ashamed of myself. I forgot his name.
I can't remember him.
He's always playing gorillas and stuff. But
Jim Belushi. Jim Belushi.
Yeah. But it was Spencer Tracy and Kong, and they did the live action. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And but they would later reprise the series in animation. Now you worked on that one.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the one you worked on, right?
Yeah. And
didn't Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch come back? Did Bob Burns come back too?
No, I don't think they because it was basically Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch gave the Ghostbusting franchise to their kids. So that's why it was different people that were in the cartoon.
Oh, so it wasn't them as the voice.
No, that was Jake was the main kid. Eddie was the guy with the kind of funny hat on. And so yeah, that was their kids, and the gorilla just happened to be around because they needed a gorilla, so they used the same gorilla.
That's interesting.
The cool thing about that was that it was the one time where, how there was the transformation scene where they said, "Let's go Ghostbusters," and they did the high five, and then the machines. They took them up an elevator and the machines put their clothing on and all that sort of stuff. Me and my friend Mike did most of that animation for that sequence that was shown, in every episode a couple times. Right. So that was kind of a little feather in our cap to have something that's, kind of classic that showed every episode.
Fantastic. Hey, were there any other questions, Martin?
Yes. I have 3 more lined up. Here's the first one.
Hey, Tom, were you a fan of those old MGM cartoons? Because I know that was Chuck Avery, wasn't it, that did those MGM cartoons for Tom Cruise?
Tex Avery.
Tex Avery.
Or Chuck Jones.
You just morphed them.
I morphed them into one person. Because I noticed that the cartoon Tummy Trouble kind of looks like an old MGM cartoon. And, of course, it also has a cameo by Droopy.
Right. Yeah, of course. I grew up with all the MGM cartoons and the Warner Brothers cartoons. And, I later on in life, I got to work for Chuck Jones on a movie called Stay Tuned. It was Pam Dauber and John Ritter.
I love that movie.
And there was a cartoon sequence in it. And I did all the key. This is when I moved up to Seattle, and I did all the key assistant animation on it. And that was a lot of fun. And then later on, Chuck Jones called me up and wanted me to head up their assistant animation department. But I was living in Seattle, and he didn't realize that. So he said, we need you in LA. And I said, well, I just moved to Seattle. I'm not moving back to LA. But those cartoons, I mean, those are the ones that, sadly, they just don't show anymore. It used to be Saturday morning cartoons. It didn't matter. There was a Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes of all the old episodes from the 40s. And that's the stuff that's truly groundbreaking and just funny as heck. But, it's all too politically correct now. You can't.
Well, the first woke people that we know about were moms, and they helped destroy Saturday mornings for kids. Everything's got to be educational. It's just like, what? Can't the kid just be entertained for a little bit and not have to be taught something?
That was our staple diet as kids in the 60s, watching those cartoons. I literally was weaned on Looney Tunes cartoons.
I remember being 12, man, and getting angry that all these moms were getting upset with Tom and Jerry and the violence. I'm like, I'm not going to go kill anybody. I just like watching the cat and the mouse fight.
Yeah.
And now the problem people have with Tom and Jerry is what there's the black maid in it who is like the Aunt Jemima thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is racially insensitive. It's like she's barely in the thing. The whole point is the
point is there are black maids, and there are Mexican maids. There are white maids. Why can't you use the black one? It's like, it's not racist to just have somebody that
to represent what's in the world. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially if it's a positive role model. That's
because we're pandering to the lowest common denominator.
Okay, hold on a second, guys. Our good friend Mike is here. Tom, go ahead, do the voice.
Hey. Meanwhile, the comic relief crusader has made his entrance into this mayhem of debauchery.
I thought you'd enjoy having him on, Tom.
And of course, Ted Knight was just so spectacular doing that in the cartoons. Meanwhile, back at the Hall of Justice.
Meanwhile, back in the Hall of Justice,
there were two great
Aquaman
voices.
is making a tuna fish sandwich because he can't do crap.
There are two great voices in cartoon history that always stick into my head for doing those kinds of voices. And it was Gary Owen for Space Ghost and Ted Knight for all of the Filmation stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
he was a staple.
I would even include Frank Welker too. I mean, dude's a voice,
but he was more of a straightforward voice actor. I'm talking about the guys that were like the announcer type.
Oh, I suppose, the narrators and stuff. Yeah.
Tom, how much contact did you have or interaction did you have with the voice cast on things you're animating, like Peter Cullen and guys like that? Did you have any contact?
Zero.
You did your job, and then they came in and did their job, I guess.
They did all that down in the bowels of the studio, and once they were done, it was on tape. And then there was a guy that had a reel-to-reel tape that he could run it across the head of a recorder and slow it down enough. And he wrote down the center of the exposure sheet what the character was saying, so that we knew on every cell what their mouth should look like.
So just how compartmentalized is the process then? I mean, if you let's take a show like my favorite is probably Black Star. Great show. Love that show.
Love it, yeah.
So there's some great voice actors on that. It's obviously, there's a great writing. How compartmentalized was that process? Were your part in it?
It was so compartmentalized. If you were an animator, that was it. I get asked all the time, did you design any of the characters? Well, no. There was a design department. That's what they did. We had such strict the deadlines were so strict that we couldn't escape what we like to do. And that's why normally the animators I was an assistant animator first. So I did that for about 3 years. And it's amazing that you said Black Star, because that's the first show I became a full animator on.
Yeah, it's a great show as well. I always wish there'd been more. Jeffrey Scott was the writer, and I don't know if you. I mean, afterwards, did you get to know these guys at all outside of the show?
The only reason that I got to know anybody outside of the show is I was the coach for the softball team at Filmation.
All right.
So when I put out the thing that we were going to have a softball team, some animators joined, some directors joined, some of the cameramen joined, some of the ink and paint. So they all kind of came from these other areas that I really didn't know anybody and joined the team. So I got to be friends with some of the guys that I might not have if not the softball team.
Well, at least you had some opportunity. Yeah. By the way, nothing to do with you, Tom, but I'd like to thank Martine for putting Saturday Morning Funtime right over my head. It fits very nicely.
It wasn't me. It was Gary.
If I could get some money for that, like for advertising on this advertising space.
There you go. Is that better? Is that better?
Sorry, Tom.
Anybody that's in charge of the show can click on that one and put it like that.
But I would urge anyone who's never seen Black Star to go watch it. It's a fantastic. I think it was only 13 episodes.
Sounds racist to me.
Well,
Star was actually
maybe.
Maybe.
Tom, I do have a question.
Become black. They made us make him white, and we just made him very tan.
That's
So
right.
it's kind of ironic. Got you. I want to ask you about Lou Scheimer. What was it like working with him?
Lou Scheimer, if not for Lou Scheimer, I probably wouldn't have had a career. I had like 3 years.
He liked working with you guys.
And he was super friendly. He realized, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to make it sound like Hanna-Barbera and Ruby Spears and these other guys that ran studios weren't great, but they were in their own way. But with Lou, he really took it to heart that if it wasn't for us, he wouldn't have his studio. And where Hanna-Barbera decided to send the work overseas and the heck with us, Lou Scheimer wouldn't do that, even though it was going to cost a lot of money to try to compete with the Japanese budgets and the Korean budgets in the U.S. He said, we're going to do it because all of the people that are in this industry are my friends, and I don't want to put them out of business. So let's give this a shot, and we'll do our best. And really, from the point where He-Man first started until Filmation closed, we were never laid off again. And we used to get laid off every year at all the other studios. So Lou,
once the work is done, they're not going to keep you around.
Yeah, and you had to wait for the networks, which were painfully slow, to choose what new shows they wanted, which shows they were going to renew. And so you're off 2 or 3 months and not making any money. And with He-Man, because it was 65 episodes and everything we did after that was the same type of syndicated work. So I never got laid off again. So for like 8 years, about 8 years, I worked straight without any time off, which was fine with me because, that's how you pay your bills is to work constantly.
And speaking of that, I wanted to ask you because, with the changing of the landscape, what do you find is the greatest resource for earning your income now? Because for me, a lot of times it was doing conventions.
Yeah, well, for me, it's retirement. So I get a pension from the motion picture pension fund.
Oh, see, that's nice. Yeah,
but it's not a big one. I have friends that stayed in the business. See, I left in 1990. My friend Mike and Carl, actually, both of the ones that we worked in He-Man, they went over to Disney and spent like 10 years at Disney. So that really added to their pension that they get every year. But I didn't want to stay in LA anymore. It was just a place that was, I didn't want to live there anymore. And I ended up getting a job at Microsoft up in Seattle. And that also helped because I got some stock options and stuff like that to be able to.
Yeah, I got to tell you, if you retire from comic books, you don't get shit.
Yeah,
admit it, Tom. You get paid in Acme gold bars, don't you?
That's right. If people know what Acme is.
I don't know if they would know now, but yeah.
There was an acronym. What is it?
What Acme was, because everybody knows it from the Roadrunner especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were two different types of animation pegs, and those are the things that we put the paper on that had the holes punched in it.
Yeah.
There's Oxbury pegs and Acme pegs. And Acme pegs were used on the West Coast, and Oxbury was used on the East Coast. So I heard it was just a play on that word to kind of jab at Oxbury that Acme was the more popular of the pegs. But that's why everything was Acme.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's a lot of pegging there.
You're muted all this time, and that's the one you come back with. Good God, man!
I'm trying to say other things and ask questions, but I can't. Getting. So.
You and John look like a cute couple, Keith.
Yeah, the two of you sitting there together. Here, let's put them together. Hold on, let's
cute couple.
And we'll put
Strangers in the night.
Strangers. Yeah, there we go. Hey, we got some questions. Slasher Fred, a good friend of this channel, says, "Hey Tom, when you worked on the Flintstones, did you ever watch the series Honeymooners? Because the series was a spoof on that show."
No kidding.
Yeah.
Was it? No, never.
Well, and what people don't realize is that if anybody has seen Top Cat.
Oh God, I love Top Cat. Absolutely love
Top Cat was my favorite as a kid because his
Yeah,
name
me
was
too.
TC and my initials are TC.
Nice.
But that was Sergeant Bilko.
Yeah, it was Sergeant Bilko.
Okay.
He even sounds like him. The actor, the voice actor,
Absolutely.
did a great impression of Silver.
And Scooby Doo was something called Dobie Gillis.
Oh,
that makes sense.
Dobie was Fred, and the other girl was Daphne, and then there was a character named, what was her? I'm blanking on her name.
I think it's Irma.
No. But she was Zelda. Her name was Zelda. She was kind of a quirky person. And then, of course, Maynard G. Krebs is Shaggy.
Right.
He had
he even had the little goatee. That's right.
He would even, when he would say the word work, he'd always goes, work. And of course, this Scoob.
And that brought Casey Kasem doing that voice that way.
So, Tom, I'm so pleased you mentioned Top Cat because nobody ever wants to talk about Top Cat these days. And I was a total adherent to that show. I loved it. That theme song is still stuck in my head to this day.
Show.
But you brought up Scooby-Doo, and so we've got a comment from Boosh McFadden.
Boosh.
Did you see Velma?
The mighty
and
Boosh.
why did you do that to yourself? I don't understand that question.
You mean
I do. Yeah.
Is that what he's talking
the
new
animated
show
series? Got you.
No,
I keep forgetting that existed.
I won't watch that. Come on.
Nobody watches that garbage.
Actually, Tom,
this is the thing. Okay, I mean, I'm on the soapbox because I do a lot of Comic Cons and I get asked that question all the time. It's like, Velma is a white girl that's kind of a little mousy with the glasses.
Yeah.
That's very intelligent.
Yeah.
Why do you make her an Indian?
Because Mindy
failed.
Kaling
Make
wanted
up
to
a
do the
show
part.
with an Indian character and do that show, but don't
make your own.
make
Yeah,
Velma.
exactly. That's the thing. They keep wanting to swap things out.
Always. I mean, in the Revelations, Tila, number one, looks like a man. She's got her hair shaved like she's a punk rocker. That's not Tila. You know, if you want a punk rocker type character, make one up and add her to the show, but don't change my characters into something I don't recognize.
Well, the other thing with that was also the fact that Kevin Smith, for whatever reason, never did any real research because he knew someone that actually worked for Filmation.
Well, he hated. He hated. He admitted publicly he hated He-Man.
See, I tried when I first heard they were going to do it. I tried to get in contact with somebody so I could be in the loop to at least say no, or yes, because haven't done it yet. Like our original TV show, I say take our TV show and just make the stories for 46-year-olds instead of 6-year-olds.
Yeah.
and keep the characters the same, and it would be a huge hit around the world. But nobody ever does that. They want to change it, and it ruins it. And most people end up hating the new version.
Yeah.
Well, that's what. Oh, I was just gonna say.
Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the person who was in charge of that for Netflix is Ted Biaselli. That was the guy that was in charge of making all those changes, even though he supposedly was a fan. But go ahead with the question.
No, he's not. A fan wouldn't do that.
So
No.
With all the shows that you are acknowledged like direct ripoffs or copies or homages, however you want to put for these series, was there ever talks of like lawyers being involved from the original shows? Because it seems like Hollywood's kind of sue happy when you know directly copy. So it's
this is just like secondhand, but I heard that Jackie Gleason was aware that the Flintstones was a ripoff of the Honeymooners, and his lawyer told him, "You don't want to sue the Flintstones. It's too popular."
That's what I read too.
And what it's doing is it's making the Honeymooners even better in people's eyes because it was such a good cartoon.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious, even with Barney Rubble's voice. Hey Fred, it's like, hey,
clearly it's art. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
but what's funny, if you remember, Tom, the first season of the Flintstones, Mel Blanc did the voice differently.
Yeah.
True.
In fact, later on, when he was in that really bad car accident, Dawes Butler did the voice for a few episodes, and it was really different. It was really hard to even believe it was Barney.
Yeah. Here's something just anecdotal. When I was in the U.S. Army, I was out hanging out with the guys drinking, and somebody said something funny, and I laughed. And the guy goes, "You laugh like Barney Rubble." And I didn't pay any attention until later. Somebody said something funny again. I went, "Oh shit, I really do."
Actually, Tom, I got a question. Like back in the 80s, like for example with Sunbow, like one show in particular, like say Transformers, they went from script to finish animation in like 3 months, which was really insane because of the popularity of the show and stuff like that. Did you find that it was the same way, say, with the rise in popularity with He-Man during filmation?
No,
like,
because we
had like that.
We already had a schedule that was set.
Right.
See, these other things like Sunbow and Deke, that took over when all the studios sent the work overseas. They were in the United States, but all the work was being shipped overseas. So, that's why if you look at the animation, a lot of the stuff was shot on 3s instead of 2s. So it just doesn't move as smooth. Even shows that were well done, like Thundercats, when the characters run, they don't look like they weigh anything. Their legs are moving, but they're not going up and down like you would if you were running. They're just kind of running at center. And
there was rotoscoping used by you guys when you did He-Man.
Yeah, early on, the very first, all of the run scenes were all rotoscoped. And that was mainly to save time and to make sure that the stuff that we were going to be playing over and over and over at least looks really good.
Yeah.
Was the rotoscoping one particular person, a model that had been used for rotoscoping for a lot of different animated shows like Tarzan, Lone Ranger, Flash Gordon, and so on?
No, because they, especially with He-Man, they had a guy that was a muscle builder, so he was just a huge guy. And that worked well for both He-Man and Skeletor because they were both pretty buff. Tarzan was much slimmer and more human looking. And so whoever they got to do that
was a different actor. Because I got to tell you, though, because I get why Keith is asking us, is a lot of that rotoscoped action is very similar from cartoon to cartoon. Flash Gordon did it too. And the reason they'd run around a corner and you'd see that it was clearly rotoscoped. Well, it looked like it might be the same model.
Yeah, well, the reason for that was that when we did what we called stock scenes,
right,
there were runs across the screen this way. There were runs diagonally in both directions. And so it was all scripted what they were going to do. In an action show, you want somebody, doing flips and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it was all scripted. And of course, when we did He-Man, it was just, let's use a lot of the stuff, the same ideas that we had in Tarzan, because it's going to be an action adventure show like that.
And it was generally in 12 frames per second, right? Not 24?
Yeah, because 24 is, you have to draw 24 drawings. And 12 frames a second is perfect. It works. It looks fine. And you just shoot each drawing twice.
Well, now you bring up a whole other question, because Hanna-Barbera established the change in the system of shooting instead of 24, 18.
Yeah.
In order, because that 2 frames a second saved money when you do a half an hour to an hour.
Yeah.
So did you guys follow that with Filmation too? Or?
Yeah. Well, that's because the human eye really can't, 24 and 12, it's hard to tell the difference. And the only time you'd shoot something on what they call ones, which is 24 frames a second, is if something was moving really fast across the screen. Because if you had something going across the screen really quick, it would look like it would pop on and then pop off, rather than be flowing from right to left or left to right. So you would shoot that in ones, and that way the eye was able to catch it all the way across. And so that was the difference between something that was like special effects. Or if the guy shot up, if he threw something really fast, or a rocket took off or something like that, we would do that on ones. Speed lines, if the guy was going to run and take off and have those lines behind him, sometimes those would be in ones too, just so that it wouldn't look like it was popping on and off. But 12 drawings per second was like the perfect. I mean, even Disney did 12 per second. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Tom, I was at the perfect age. I was 9 when Godzilla came out. So thank you for that. It was my favorite cartoon. How much input did Toho have to the cartoon at all? Or if any at all?
That's way above my pay grade. I was an animator. I wasn't in the meetings when they had talks about stuff like that. So I just don't know. One of the things I had is some guy had me do I thought this was pretty clever. He had me do a commission for him of Godzilla holding, how he holds the ship up.
Right.
And instead he had me holding up the mystery machine with all the Scooby-Doo in it. And I thought that was pretty clever. And so I did that, did it pretty large too, so it could look pretty cool.
All right.
But Godzilla, to me, like I said, it was an incredible hit. And I had no idea at the time that it was that popular.
It kind of grew later. And by the way, CJ, we brought that up that because of the cartoon, it caused confusion within the kaiju world, because in the cartoon, the kid was called Godzuki, whereas in the films, it was Minya. And it was confusing to me because I kept calling Minya Godzuki as a kid. But Star Trek, I wanted to go into that because even though it was before your time there,
right?
We had a question from our Muslim uncle, which was Filmation Star Trek actually finished their 5-year mission. That's right. Filmation did the last 2 years of the mission. And I love that. And all of us Star Trek fans love that they did that. And it is canon. It's considered canon. And I love that. I also want to point out that, have you seen these guys on YouTube took the Filmation style and did Voyager and Next Generation. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I got to give this here. I'm sure we're going to get claimed on it. I don't care. I'll edit it later. Here you go. Let's do Next Gen first. Here we go.
Direct hit, Deck 9. Damage report. Structural latching system integrity breached.
Prepare to take us out of here, number 1. Fire up the engines. Half impulse till we clear the nebula.
then punch it up to warp 9. Ready phases, load forward torpedo base.
Tell me that's not incredible.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool.
And they did it with Voyager too. I'll pull that one up real quick. I don't want to show the whole thing because I don't want to get totally shut down. Here we go. So YouTube does that.
James Reed, report. Terrorist broke out of confinement in engineering. He used a phaser on the port plasma conduit. We have power failures all over the ship.
Where is he now?
We're having trouble tracking him. We can't get power to the internal sensors. Tuvok has a security team searching deck by deck.
What I find interesting is Beltran sounds like he has a lisp or speech impediment.
Janeway's got the longest neck in the world.
I know, she's got like a 5-foot neck.
She should have all those rings around it. Like,
but at least she's got the power bun.
Yeah, the power bun. I thought that was really cool that somebody, a big fan of the classic Filmation, went and did that. And I'm just like, it was, each one's about 5 minutes long. And I'm
and
like,
that show won an Emmy too, the Star Trek show. So that's the only Emmy that Filmation ever won, I believe.
Did you do any other projects for Hanna-Barbera or other studios that won awards?
Yeah, the only thing I worked on was called Babes and Bullets. It was a Garfield special.
Yeah.
And it was really clever because it was done like an old 1940s film noir movie where Garfield plays Sam Spade, but it's Spade like a cat. And it was all, he narrated it like they narrated the old movies, and it was actually done all in black and white. And it was pretty clever. It was a whole murder, and he solved the murder, and that won an Emmy. So that's really the only thing I've ever worked on that won an Emmy.
And that was voiced by Lorenzo Music, as I recall, too, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many studios have you gotten to work for as an animator?
Well, let's see. I did Hanna-Barbera, Ruby Spears, Filmation, Bear Animation.
Ruby Spears, of course, for people who don't know, did like Inspector Gadget and stuff like that.
Plastic Man, Heathcliff, and Thundar.
Thundar.
And Mighty Man and the World's Ugliest Dog, Yuck. And
you ever do any work with Turner and Adult Swim or Cartoon Network?
That's all way later. In 1990, I moved to Seattle, and the only thing that really kept me connected to the animation industry is I started directing some stuff. I directed a few episodes of King of the Hill. I did one of The Simpsons, Savage Dragon, Heat Seekers, Extreme Dinosaurs, Extreme Ghostbusters.
How was that working on King of the Hill?
Really different. It was interesting way that they did their layouts and stuff. It was almost laid out as an animated scene. There wasn't much to direct, just the timing of each movement. But still, when I first got that, I thought, oh my gosh, this looks like Beavis and Butthead. But
that's who created it.
It was really, really funny, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that was one of the better shows I've worked on. I really enjoyed that a lot. I
can tell you, it was one of the best sitcoms on TV at the time, and it was animated.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
The family sitcom was really good.
It, like everything else, went a little bit off the rails at the end. They run out.
You going to say something, Keith?
Well, I was just going to ask, being a comic book fan, how did that feel, at least as someone working on the with the characters for Thundar the Barbarian, working on characters that have been designed by Jack Kirby?
Oh, Jack Kirby!
It was awesome, and because my background was comic books. When I did posing, everything looked a little bit more dynamic than some of the other guys because they weren't really comic book fans, where everything for me looked like Jack Kirby, with just super dynamic and everything like that. So that helped me, I think, in my animation. I know that somebody asked me one time, how come there weren't very many female animators, and I really don't know the answer to that. But I do know that when the couple that were there, everything that they did looked a little feminine. And I don't mean feminine in the wrong way. I just mean everything looked very soft, like women are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The men, you kind of, it doesn't matter if they're kind of rough looking because they're men, but if you make a woman look rough, it doesn't work in animation.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this in another interview you did. It's harder to do women.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find as an artist myself that drawing women is very difficult because I got to focus more.
Same way, because you animate them and they have a certain softness and a way they move that's unlike men. And I'm sorry, ladies, but you're different than us. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult for a guy to do, I think.
Well, it's funny you bring this up, because if you go all the way back to Disney, early Disney, one of the things they ran into when they were trying to do Cinderella and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was animating males, because doing the women was easy with their style of animation because everything was smooth and elegant. Yeah. Whereas when they drew the men, they looked too smooth and elegant.
Yeah.
So they were having trouble doing Prince Charming and the other guy. And they had to come up with a whole new formula of how to draw the men. Yeah. And part of it was the introduction of rotoscoping.
Yeah. Well, and it's because that the men always looked a little bit, how can I say this delicately?
Delicately is a good way to say it.
They looked a little delicate. Were they light in the loafers, Tom?
Yeah. Light in the loafers.
San Francisco.
Yeah, it's not super athletic, I guess, is really the way to put it.
It's a really, yeah. They had more.
They look like confirmed bachelors.
Yes.
Oh.
The kind of guys that needed a beard.
Exactly.
It's getting on thin ice here.
That's not why I have my beard, though. I'm perfectly fine with that one.
We're speaking about the metaphorical beard.
It's getting on thin ice here.
Oh, I get
literal.
Yes.
But so later on, you're saying you ran into the opposite, which is it's easier to animate the men, the masculine men, the action, and harder to draw the women and make them look like women.
Yeah, I think part of it is because at Disney, they're trying to make the things look human. In Filmation, we're trying to make them look cartoony and exciting.
Right.
We overact more than the Disney cartoon overacts. All the real people or the human figures in a Disney movie move like human figures.
Right.
In comic books and cartoons, that's boring. You want them to be strong and powerful and do things that normal people can't do. And that's why ultimately doing rotoscope doesn't work, because rotoscope only captures the human side of things. And if you want it to look more powerful, you have to take it beyond what rotoscope can do.
You got to give it that dynamic edge. And I know what you're talking about.
Over the top, but still believable.
Because you go all the way back, because you brought up Jack Kirby. I want to bring up one of the fun things about Kirby is his anatomy was not always perfect, but the drawing was. The realism wasn't, because he was focusing on making it interesting and dynamic. He created action lines.
Right.
He did so many things, but he also would draw things in a way nobody drew in the exaggerated way that he would draw. And again, his anatomy was not always right.
Yeah.
I didn't care about that. What I cared about was how dynamic the artwork looked. And he captured with a static image, what you were talking about doing with animation. And I agree with you. That's really what makes filmmaking look so good with some of especially He-Man, Flash Gordon, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So how much did you guys use mirrors for referencing, doing like an over-exaggerated face?
We had mirrors, and most of the characters didn't do any really wild takes where you'd have to do something really strange. I noticed every now and then Skeletor would be like aghast at something, and all of a sudden the skull would actually move, which couldn't happen. But that was the only way to really get it to look like he was.
Didn't you? I seem to remember where his eyes got large once.
Yeah, and same thing. His eyebrows would go down, and I remember I got called into the office one time for some dialogue on Skeletor, and the director said, Tom, your dialogue here is terrible. He's saying good, and you don't have him with a six mouth, which is ooh, the lips out. And I go, Lou, he doesn't have lips. So he doesn't have a six mouth. It's just his mouth could only go up and down. It couldn't go. Yeah. So he finally said, "Oh my gosh, you're right."
Well, he ran.
But even if you look at the old Spider-Man comics with Ditko, even though Spider-Man's eyes were behind the mask, he would use those eye holes to squash and stretch. If he was thinking, the white part would get smaller, and it would impart the fact that he was thinking. And even though it was
fully exaggerated, the movement of that eye.
Do that, but the idea was that doesn't matter. This cartoon, this shows you what he's thinking, and that was the important part, not that the drawing was perfect. And as far as anatomy, I think Kirby's anatomy was fine through most of his career. I think he started having difficulty when he moved over to DC and started making the really square knees and those squiggle lines that he put in instead of.
Well, what I was told, Tom, was that he was being overworked, and the deadlines were crazy.
But I think plus he was in his 70s and he was losing his eyesight. And he just couldn't draw like that anymore. And you didn't have Sinnott following up, fixing the little mistakes like they did in Thor and in Fantastic Four, because his anatomy is pretty darn good when you go back to the old days.
Oh, yeah. When he was doing like the barbarian stuff, too, in particular Captain America. We got some more questions for you from the chat. Let's see. CJ with the action grip is absolutely losing his shit out there right now. So I'm going to get to these questions. Vinkman's girl says, we're not even sure she was a maid, referring to what we talked about earlier. I think there's more times I've seen her just being in her own place than being a maid. So that was a good point. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then here's CJ with a lot of questions. Let's get through these real quick. Oh my God, did you do Fang Face too? That was on the same thing that Mighty Man and Yuck.
Yeah.
Followed by the next question. Wait, let me get to the first one here. Oh man, these are out of order, these questions. Let me get to the.
You are out of order.
Yeah, here it is. No, better yet, Tom. What does Yuck look like without the doghouse on his head? LOL, I gots to know. Followed by. Yeah, I know, right? I always want to know how ugly the dog would be.
He kind of looked like Darth Vader with he was almost bald with like sticks of hair sticking out all over the place. They never showed his face from the front. It was only from the back.
Did he ever have a face that you guys drew?
No.
Behind the scenes? No.
No.
Then he says, we all want to know what Yuck looks like under the doghouse.
Yeah.
And then last question from CJ. Oh man, they're never going to tell me what Yuck really looked like. No, you're never going to find out. You're shit out of luck, CJ.
Same thing with Orko.
Yeah, Orko. I liked Orko. I just liked the fact that he wasn't in the live action film, and that they didn't do him justice in the new show or either animated shows. I didn't like either iterations. The one that was done before Netflix or the one on Netflix. But
it could have been handled really well, and they just didn't do it. They didn't even attempt,
There was no attempt. There's the word, attempt. Yeah. They had to put forth an effort.
Ted Biaselli was the guy in charge of pretty much all of that stuff. And
not Kevin Smith. A lot of people think that Kevin Smith, Keith, you and I talked about this.
Yeah, Kevin Smith was really Ted Biaselli's
mouthpiece.
In a business sense. Yeah, he was the mouthpiece. But Ted Biaselli was the guy at Netflix, and he's still there, who was in charge of how they would handle a lot of this stuff. And turns out the guy was a former actor in his earlier years who somehow got into an executive level over at Netflix and made all of those decisions.
They screwed up Tila. Just everything was, as my favorite character would say, ruined. Brian, ruined.
Ruined.
Ruined. They ruined it. But we got any other questions? Any other questions, Martin? Oh, King Sporcal's here. What's up? Orko could have been cool. I agree. By the way, I'll tell you just a funny anecdotal story. Way back, right when the movie was coming out, Dolph Lundgren was dating my best friend's sister. And seriously, it was really weird. And so
and you were really jealous.
I got invited to
date Dolph, didn't you?
I got invited to dinner. And I was told as I got there, Tom, that I wasn't allowed to ask any He-Man questions because I knew that's why I wanted to be at the dinner. And I'm like, but that's the only reason to talk to him. So I had to shut my mouth the whole dinner until he said that he admitted that he had gone to method acting school. And I think he went to the one in New York. I'm not sure. But he was talking about that. And I immediately piped up. I said, is that how you played Adam He-Man in Masters of the Universe using method? And immediately my best friend kicked me under the table really, really hard, which made Dolph Lundgren laugh because I went, oh.
We had a situation when I worked at Bear Animation. Mike and I, we both kind of entertained the troops when kids would come in to tour the studio. I had a Mr. T puppet that you pull down and it punches. And my friend Mike had the Rocky puppet. And one day, Dolph Lundgren was driving his rented Ferrari, and it broke down in front of our studio. So he came in to use the phone. So we went over with our puppets, pity the fool, talking to. So I met Dolph Lundgren, years later at a con, and I asked him if he remembered that, and he said he didn't. And I said, how do you not remember two puppets fighting you in an animation studio and your Ferrari broke down? But he didn't remember anything.
He was doing cocaine.
I just read an article today. He's marrying some girl that's 40 years old.
God, that's funny. Dude, you had because I know the puppets you're talking about, you pulled the string in the box and punched.
Yeah.
Exactly. Remember those? Oh my God, that's crazy.
Anytime people came into Filmation to tour, we'd always do our little routine with the characters, and the kids would always ignore the guy that was trying to show them how to do animation, and they'd be watching us on our little puppet show.
Absolutely. Wow. Come on, man. There's no argument there. It's like clearly the puppets win.
When did they actually close down Filmation? When was that?
Oh boy, this is speak about coincidence.
Because that was 88, right?
Yeah, it was 89. It was
89.
February 3rd, 1989. Now you know what happened February 3rd of 1959?
That was when they started Filmation, wasn't it?
Buddy Holly was killed in a plane crash.
Oh, the day the music died.
No, 57 is when they started Filmation.
So this was the day the animation died. February 3rd, 1989.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, the irony, another date was September 8th, 1973. That was the day that Star Trek, the animated series, premiered. No. That was also the same day that Super Friends, at the exact same time on a different channel, also started, because NBC had Star Trek, the animated series, and ABC had Super Friends.
Yeah, gotcha.
And what year did you start with Filmation? That was 79, right? Or
no, I started Filmation. I was at Hanna-Barbera 78. I was there till 1980, where I went over to Ruby Spears, and that's when I did Thundar, Plastic Man, Fang Face, and Cliff. And then what happened was we went on strike, and we went on strike, and the union wanted to get more money for us. My argument was, I don't need more money. I need more work. So take away the 3 months that I'm laid off and give me the same pay, and that would be my raise. And of course, by that time, the animation studios were already threatening to send the work overseas. So I thought, boy, to go on strike and do this to them, they're gonna send the work overseas, and we're gonna have no money coming in. And that's exactly
you end up in that situation because tell me if you feel this way, that it's better to have a percentage of something than 100% of nothing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my argument was, I'd rather get paid what we're getting paid now and still have jobs than to get paid $50 an hour.
Security is important.
Yeah. So anyway, I had heard
security is important.
Filmation had said that Lou Scheimer had said he wouldn't send work overseas. So right away, as soon as we went on strike, I called up a friend of mine that worked over at Filmation and said, "Are they hiring?" And they said, "Yeah." So right away, I just, I never quit Ruby Spears. I just didn't go back. And that's when I started at Filmation, and I started out in this building, not even the main building. And the woman who was the head of the assistant department said, "I realize you want to become an animator, so I'm going to send you over to the main studio to do our fixes. It's going to be boring, but at least you'll be there where the directors are, and you can show them your artwork and maybe eventually become an animator." And that's exactly what happened. I would go into every day I'd do something at night, some animation of my own, and bring it in, and they'd shoot it on video for me, and I'd get the directors to look at it. And then finally I did this scene with Superman flying all over the place and smashing rocks and stuff. And so I showed the directors that, and they said, "Okay, you're ready to be an animator now." So they handed me my first few scenes of Black Star.
That's wow. I am curious at Ruby Spears. Did they just just not call you?
No. They basically, because the strike was broken up. I mean, we just didn't. There was no contract signed. It was just, we're sending the work overseas, and that's it. So they closed the doors.
They closed the doors.
Okay. And that's really why they didn't do another season of Thundar, because even though it was popular, nobody, they didn't have time to get it set to go overseas. So they basically just kind of canceled the show.
Now, Ruby Spears, the two gentlemen behind that were the guys that used to work for Hanna-Barbera, and they were the guys that came up with the idea for Scooby-Doo.
Correct.
Who spun off their own company.
Yeah, it's Joe Ruby and Ken Spears.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Our Muslim uncle has a question. He says, "I would love a parody of someone trying to look behind Orko's mask, and it's an enveloping view of the cosmos." Less a question, more of a statement. And
like a statement. First off, you got to spell Orko, O-R-K.
Yeah, with the
O-R-C-O.
Yeah, it's Orko with a C, like an orc. I don't think Orko was ugly. Hiding their face was trollin' culture. What is that?
Yes.
They only showed it to their chosen romantic mate. Showing their face was considered intimate act, like sex or something. Or like a Mandalorian, apparently. It is the way.
I don't know where you got that.
It just is.
I think Orko inspired Mando.
Sometimes things are the way they are because that's the way they are.
I had somebody request a commission of Orko with his mask or with his hat off, and I just came up with some crazy looking thing. So, but
that's canon now, then, Tom.
Watch it be Richard Nixon. That's where he went. Boy, fellow Americans.
Yeah.
Was there ever an ending in mind for any of the series, like like Thundar or Black Star? Was there ever like a thought of like what would be the final episodes if you guys actually got that far? Because I know a lot of them were canceled.
Yeah, I don't think that anything was ever done as this is our last season. It was always like, this is the next season, and if it gets canceled, oh well. because you wouldn't want to, if the show was really popular, why would you want to end it? And so I don't think that really ever came up where there was an ending episode, unless it was after the fact, that once it ended, maybe they would do something. But yeah, I don't think that ever happened.
I would love to have seen a final battle of He-Man and Skeletor, though.
Yeah, I think it would. I wish we hadn't stopped He-Man to do She-Ra. I wish we could have not done the two, but it was just impossible to do. It was way too much work for one episode, yet along trying to get two.
I got to tell you, I'd be remiss if I don't mention just how big a fan my son is of He-Man and She-Ra. He's got like one of the greatest collections of the action figures. And that leads me back to this thing, which was, I liked it back when cartoons were based on toy series. Like He-Man, G.I. Joe. I loved that.
Yeah. And of course, He-Man was the first to do that. And as everybody knows, it was like not even going to be a TV show, but he promised, the guy trying to get the toys made promised there would be a special.
And that was through Mattel, right?
Yeah, and they came to us, and Lou suggested just doing a whole series. So, I mean, thank you, Lou. I mean, that really saved our lives. And, it was...
the entire episode is a commercial.
Yeah, and it was literally the biggest cartoon show probably ever, selling billions of dollars of toys like in a year or two, compared to Barbie, which took 50 years.
Right.
So it was quite the phenomenon. And I don't understand why that was a bad thing to sell toys, because as a kid, it was frustrating that all of my shows didn't have toys when I was a kid. And it drove me nuts that I wanted a Spider-Man toy that I could hold in my hand. Back then, we couldn't even get T-shirts with Spider-Man on my T-shirt, until Marvel started selling them out of the comic books. So I always loved the fact that you could get toys, and, they get better and better all the time because of the whole laser and all that stuff that they're doing now. The characters really look like the character, where it was difficult back in the day when you had to sculpt it.
You bring up sculpting, and did you do some of that, or was that other people that do that?
No, I wasn't a sculptor at all. I wished I could do it because I think it looks really cool. But, I tried a little bit in school. I did some stuff, but I'm very picky. So if it didn't look good, I would just throw it away. And other people would say it looked good, but to me, it didn't look good. So.
Yeah, you have to be your own worst critic. I get you on that. If I've had people look at some of my sculpture and go, "Man, I really love that," and I'm like, "You can have it," and they're like, "You're just gonna give it to me?" I'm like, "Yeah, because it's crap. I'm not happy with what I did. The eyes are too close together, or one's slightly off from the other, and I'll be bothered by it, and I just don't want it anymore."
Yeah. It's not easy.
So when did you retire, and what brought about wanting to retire?
Yeah, let's see. Well, what brought it about was I was old. So, no, I had always kind of planned, and not that the plan was foolproof, but I had always planned to retire as soon as I could, which would be by the time I was 62, because that would be when I could finally get Social Security. And I had figured out that, yes, if you work till 70, you get more per month for Social Security, but you also have 8 years that you haven't collected it, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars that you've lost by not getting it when you start.
And what happens if you pass away before you ever collect it? You've
Exactly. So I figured out that I would have to be 89 years old to catch up if I waited till 70. So I'd have to live to 89 to make what I was going to make retiring at 62. Plus, I had the small pension from the Cartoonist Guild, and I had just planned well. And my collection of comics I sold and paid my house off, so I had no house payment. So whatever I could make, and then same thing, like I said earlier about the Microsoft stock, I had that, so that I had that as a backup. And now the bills that I pay are paid completely by my Social Security, and I am doing a lot of Comic Cons, and that's kind of my play money. So I just go. I'm still collecting comics, but now I'm buying the graded ones. And
I tell you, Comic Cons can really give you a nice spending money.
I'll tell you, and I do maybe 2 a month, and keeps me busy. It keeps me still drawing because
commissions
skills if you don't keep doing it. And I don't really like drawing that much anymore, but I don't mind doing it for the fans. It's really nice to have somebody want the He-Man and be able to put it together for them, and to get it from one of the original animators instead of just some comic book artist that draws He-Man, and they never do it like the Filmation one, and I always do it exactly like the Filmation one.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so I won't even. I get a lot of people come up and say, "Hey, can you draw this?" And it's like, "Well, yeah, I didn't work on that." So I'd really rather stick to the things that I've worked on.
You worked on.
Yeah, so that you really say this is from the guy that actually worked on the show.
You said something, Tom, that clicked with me, which is something I've said to people, because when people know that I'm an artist, they go, "Oh, you must love doing it." I'm like, "No, it's work."
Yeah,
it is work. And when you said that, I'd really rather not be drawing, but you just said that, and it's like, oh my God, I get that, because people are like, "Well, what do you want to do in your free time?" I said, "Play piano,
just do stuff that you want to do.
Watch movies, play piano. You don't draw? Like, fuck no, I do that for money."
Yeah. I remember working at Hanna-Barbera early on, and one of the guys that I worked with, his name was Sean Newton, incredibly good animator, and I did some of the assistant work on Challenge of the Super Friends that he had done the animation on, where Batman is climbing a ladder to a helicopter, like really perspective, super looking up at the helicopter. So it was really coolly drawn. And I went outside for lunch, and I sat down in the park nearby, and there he is sketching people. And I'm like, what in the heck are you doing drawing when you don't have to draw? And he said, "I just love to draw." So I'm sure he's probably right now sitting there drawing somebody. The last thing I wanted to do was draw.
It's so rare when that happens. I mean, has it happened for you where you just suddenly felt like drawing? Because it'll happen every once in a while for me.
Yeah, every now and then, but it's always when something like that Godzilla with the Scooby-Doo car, the
right.
Machine, that clicked with me as a good idea. So that I wanted to do. Somebody comes up and says, I just want Scooby-Doo standing there. It's like, well, it's easy enough, so I'll do it, but that's not very exciting to do that.
I know, Ken Pontac, he's similar way with writing, like he's a professional writer, but he was actually like genuinely impressed that I wasn't getting paid for the writing I was doing. I was like, wait, you're doing this because you enjoy it? He was actually impressed by that fact.
See, people would hate you because you're doing something for free that they want to ask money for. And they're going to go, that's what happened at Disney a lot, is people want to work at Disney so bad, they don't care what they're getting paid. And it was later on that they suddenly realized that they're making all this money for Disney. Now suddenly they want more money. But you can't do that. As an artist, you have to say, look, when I go to a convention, if I'm going to do a commission for somebody and it's $250, the people go, well, that's kind of expensive. Well, I don't want to do it unless I make $250.
What is your time worth? Yeah.
That's up to you, And of course, I'm sure everybody's experienced this as an artist too, is people come up to you at a dinner party and say, "Hey, can you draw a Scooby-Doo for me real quick?" And I'm always like, "Look, you're a plumber. I don't want you to put a toilet in for me.
Just put this.
Hey, can you thread these pipes for me real quick?"
Yeah. I got a leak. Can you check it out?
I got a leak. Yeah, exactly. Here, I'm going to show you this real quick. And go ahead and ask your question, Brian. I just want to show you this. This is my son and his husband. Look at the collection behind them on the Christmas tree too. There's He-Man and She-Ra all over the freaking place in their house. It is a He-Man museum, their house. And I had to share that with you. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry. Dude.
Well, it wasn't really a question for Tom. It was more an observation that they ask you to draw something really quick. Well, you could say, well, do you want something good or do you want something quick?
Yeah.
I know.
Tom,
round head stick figure. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Tom, any of the stuff that you usually have at your conventions that you're selling, are you able to sell those when you're not at conventions, or can people only catch those, like the T-shirts that I saw when I first ran into you, and a lot of the other?
I used to have a website, but it was done in a Microsoft front page.
Actually, I went looking for it before, Tom. What happened with that? Because it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, they took it down because they don't support Microsoft front page anymore. So I've got one that is kind of being built right now. That's 80sanimator.com, but it's just placework stuff till I can get time to put stuff out there. And because I used to have everything, you could do commissions, comic book commissions. You could buy T-shirts, you could buy mugs, you could buy anything you wanted to. And I'd like to get back to that because a lot of times it's really hard for me to carry everything in my suitcases to sell at a show. I've got a lot of things, so I have to pick and choose what I want to bring. And if I bring mugs, I can only bring like maybe 4 in order to fit it in my suitcase.
Gary will carry your suitcase for you, Tom.
Yeah,
I'll do it in a wee second. Yeah.
Hey, so Tom, just quickly, I don't know how long we've got left, Gary, but and a show like, let's take He-Man, which was a big show. As you say, a lot of episodes, a lot of work. What sort of size of team did you work with? I mean, and how did you divide that work up? I mean, who said, I'm going to do this character, this character?
Because it leads to something that I listened to on one of the documentaries about Filmation, about how they started, and they had like a skeleton crew, just like a handful of people.
Right.
Did that continue all the way through? No, Brian's asking?
No. What happened, especially when I got to Filmation, is once the whole industry imploded, now you've got the 700 people at Hanna-Barbera and the 500 people at Ruby Spears looking for work. And Filmation was the only game in town. Well, like I said, I was lucky enough to jump on the bandwagon before the strike disintegrated. And so now everybody that didn't want to work at Filmation suddenly wanted to work at Filmation. And we grew to the point where we probably had, 1,000 employees. And the animation crew was maybe like 60 animators. And then you had assistant animators, maybe 70 animators. There were directors. There were probably, maybe 15 to 20 different directors. And what would happen is every week we had this wheel on the wall, and the arrow pointed to what director was going to be handing out which episode of He-Man or She-Ra or whatever it was, Ghostbusters. But when you would get done with your work, you'd go out to that arrow and look, and you'd go to that director, and he would hand you like 20, 25 scenes and say, okay, this is your week's work. He would kind of keep in mind that he wants to keep it so you can meet your deadline of 80 feet per week. And if it was something difficult, they'd give you something really simple to do to pad it so you could get up to your 80. And so it was really pretty random. You'd walk in and the next batch of 20 scenes was given to you. So
but those scenes could include multiple characters.
Oh, yeah.
And meanwhile, someone else is doing the next set of scenes with the same characters.
Or the scene could have wind blowing through the scene. So we'd have to animate the wind and the trees if something was blowing, or the leaf falling, or the rain hitting the ground. So whatever was in those scenes, that's what we had to animate. And if you had never animated rain hitting the ground, you were stuck for a while till you could research and ask people.
You got to look for those references. Like, oh my God. Because you know that it's not reinventing the wheel. Somebody drew that before.
Right. And you want it to look like everybody else's rain. You don't want Eternia rain to look different from scene to scene.
And how much reuse of material is there? So certain scenes where you know the action is going to be the same.
Yeah.
How were you able to reuse that? Yeah.
A lot. And that the reason that we were able to compete with the Japanese and the Korean budgets was the fact that we did that. We kept track of every scene. So if there was going to be a scene with rain in it, you knew right where the cells were to do that. And that way the animator would just expose the cells as they were exposed in the original scene on brand new exposure sheets and turn that in, but the work was already done.
That's good.
You just
well, this leads to my next question, Tom.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a finished episode and then you catch something and you're like, fuck?
Well, I don't cuss, but
fudge.
Yeah, fudge. I would say fudge.
Oops.
Normally it didn't happen that often because we had a whole checking crew that checked every scene before it was filmed, as if they were the cameraman. They actually would go through the entire scene,
frame by frame.
That way, if somebody's going to run into a rock while they were walking or something, they'd take it back to the animator to move the rock.
Right.
So I didn't see a lot of mistakes like that. And a lot of that stuff was caught in dailies also. After everything was shot on the camera, the next day they would shoot dailies, which was putting it through the projector and showing Lou what was done the day before. And that way he could pick out some of the mistakes that needed to be fixed. But at the same time, he would pick out one of the scenes that he would say, all right, I like that scene. Let's make that one of the stock scenes so that now every time He-Man battles Beastman, we use something out of this stock scene to save money.
I would love to have had the job as final checker. I think that would have been good. You just get to sit and watch everything all day.
Well, and one of the strange things is, this is another one of those weird things. Checkers were almost 100% female.
Well, Terry McDonald is a name that comes up on a lot of this stuff. I don't know if you know Terry McDonald, but yeah, it's funny that they must just have that better attention to detail.
And same thing with ink and painters. The ink and painters were almost all women. There were a few men, but it was mainly, way overwhelmingly.
Interesting.
And the same thing.
That is interesting.
Animators, it was more men, and assistant animators, it was pretty equal. There were a lot of women that were really, excellent draftsmen, but they just didn't have it in their head to be able to move things realistically. And it was easier to just stay an assistant animator and be very good rather than move up to animator and be one of the not so good animators.
I mean, we don't want to gender stereotype, but why do you think it was that the checkers were almost exclusively female? What was it? Did you ever talk to these
I really have no idea.
No, it's weird. Maybe the guys would just get too caught up in the show, watching the show, as opposed to checking.
Well, it's the same kind of job as a continuity editor in film, and that's diverse. It's just so strange that in the animation field, that was predominantly all female doing that job.
Men and women are different, and they gravitate towards different things.
No kidding, Shinatsky. God, thank you for being here, dude.
I'm sorry, but given our current climate, saying that is something that may get
it's revolutionary to say that now.
Yeah, somebody write this down before we forget.
Shinatsky, you're a radical. You're a free radical, and you must be eliminated.
I wish I had known that when I was younger, that women are different than men.
Yeah, I know. It's just like I'm like 59 years old and I'm just learning this. Wow.
Yeah, that's right. All these years.
But yeah, I get asked those questions a lot at cons, because really I go to a lot of cons and it's almost always the same question. So if I do my panel, I can almost say yes, no, 3 times a day, Thundar, because they're always the same questions. And I wish I had answers for some of this, but I really have no clue.
You should just have board up, Tom. A board with the top 20 questions, and you get to with a dollar value next to each one, and say you get to pick your question off this board.
Also, create a list of questions. Stop asking me.
It's like playing Stairway to Heaven in a guitar shop. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
No question about thunder. No.
The forbidden song to play in a guitar store.
No thunder.
Bye, John.
I guess
John's go. See you later, John. Take care,
see
buddy.
You, buddy. I guess it's like, the great Ray Davies of the Kinks, when he was once asked, how many, don't you ever get sick of playing You Really Got Me live? And he said, no, because there's always a dozen people in the crowd who've never heard it live before. Yeah. So I play it for them.
Yeah.
So that's probably the same feeling, Tom, you get. Okay, I've heard this question before, but it's the first time this person's asked that question.
Well, and I realize, too, that that's good, because that means everybody's got the same feelings about the show, that they have the same questions. So I really, even if it's the 500th time I've answered it, I answer it with exuberance, because I want them to realize that, yes, I mean, that is a perfect question. Everybody asks it. So it's not, I'm saying it's boring that everybody's asked it. It's amazing that everybody pulls the same things out of what we watched. It's really good. And
what's the most surprising question you've ever been asked?
Because that was my question next too. It's the exact same thing. It's like what was the most shocking question you've ever been asked?
Where did that come from? Yeah.
Man, I don't know if I have like a surprising question.
Or one you didn't want to answer, perhaps.
Like, did you ever go to work in your underwear?
Did you ever go to work in somebody else's underwear?
No. I think there have been questions that I don't want to answer that more have to do with just the way things are today. Because I'm pretty uncontroversial.
You mean for the cancel culture?
Gotcha. Yeah. It's just
non-controversial.
I remember one time all I said was, and this was a big brouhaha. I was in my panel. There's like maybe 100 people listening as I do this whole PowerPoint panel that goes through my career and then kind of how we did a show step by step. And during that whole thing, I said, now it used to be in the old days, to be an animator, you had to be able to draw with a pencil. Nowadays, you can use computers, you can use whatever. Well, this girl came up and she was completely offended that I had said she can't draw. And I didn't say she can't draw.
No,
but
you said it's different now.
She was offended by it. But it doesn't, as long as the end product is good and the story is good, I don't really care how they got there. I wish a lot of things were animated with pencil as opposed to computer stuff, but it doesn't really make it good or bad. There are really good 2D animated films and there are really bad 2D animated films. And there are really good 3D computer films and really bad 3D computer films. Have you ever seen, what was it called? Dinosaur? I think the Dinosaur, but it was a Disney movie.
No, that's Spielberg. Wait.
No, Dinosaurs was the Disney.
That was
one.
Disney, yes. That was
Horrible.
CG, yeah.
Horrible. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Yep.
Now, and the thing about it is kind of what I touched on earlier. The backgrounds in this movie looked like photographs. I mean, they might have just gone into the jungle and photographed the jungle and then put the animation on top of it. And to me, it's like, why make an animated film if you're not going to animate stuff?
This
lifeless. Yeah.
This falls into the category because I'm really good friends with Drew Blair, who is one of the #1 airbrush artists in the world, and we've known each other because we both came up doing Star Trek art. My first big pro job was doing Star Trek art for three licensed art prints for Star Trek. I'm the only Star Trek artist who ever been commissioned to do battles from Star Trek. Nobody else ever been commissioned. Keith Bergthong or Drew. And Drew is just so photorealistic. In fact, I challenge people to determine if it's a photo or if he painted it. It's that good. And he told me one day, he says, Gary, you should come down here. I could teach you to paint like this. I said, I don't want to paint like that. I like what I paint and draw to look like I actually painted it or drew it. I want it to look like artwork, not a photo. And I want it photorealistic to a point, but I don't want it to be a photo. And that's the problem I have with a lot of the artwork, like what he does. I love his work. His skill is amazing. But it's what's the point? It just looks like a replication of a photo.
Yeah. And this is, I get in this argument every now and then because, and to preface it, I think his work is amazing.
You know who Drew is, Drew Blair.
No, but I'm going to tell you that I'm talking about somebody else.
Oh.
So this guy, I love his artwork. I think it's wonderful. It's so well done. It's beautiful. But at the same time, I hate it because he uses models and the character.
Boris Vallejo.
No, it doesn't look like Superman. It looks like a cosplay.
Alex Ross. Wonder Woman. We know who you're talking about.
Cosplay artist. Alex Ross.
Alex Ross.
The stuff is amazing, but I don't want to see his next door neighbor as Wonder Woman. I want to see Wonder Woman.
No, I get what you're saying because a lot of people, don't get me wrong, I admire his work. It's beautiful. His watercolors, his acrylics, just beautiful work. But there's something about it that does feel like he's just drawing and painting cosplayers. It really feels that way sometimes.
And I don't mean that as any, like I said, I love his work. I mean, I think it's beautiful. But he did Shazam and used Fred McMurray as the face. And it's like, what are you doing using an actor's face as Shazam? That doesn't look anything like Shazam. It's just his hair was kind of curly on top. I think that he thought it looked like.
Well, it's because, back in the day, it was known that Fred McMurray was the person who they made Captain Marvel look like. But the fact is, it's not Fred McMurray.
No, it doesn't look like Fred McMurray. So I don't want to hang that on my wall. I'd rather hang a Neil Adams drawing of Batman that looks like Batman rather than the guy's next door neighbor cosplaying Batman. And
absolutely,
no matter how well painted it is, and back to the whole background thing, it's like, I always feel like if you're going to do backgrounds and you're going to make them look like a photo, just use a photo. It doesn't take as long. One click of the exposure and you've got your photo, and you don't have to worry about shadows and painting everything else into it. But that to me isn't what makes the animated film look good. It's a style of the background. Like in Sleeping Beauty, the style is so weird, but that's what really makes Sleeping Beauty stand out from all the other animated films, because the background style is so different.
Well, a long time ago, the Greeks, they spent untold centuries working on finessing sculptures to where they were basically an absolute replication of the human being. And as soon as they did that, they stopped. Because more real than the real.
Yeah, and I just, like I said, I prefer, I don't mind the realism. Let that be its own thing. But I want the comic book art to go back to looking like comic book art. I want animation to look like animation. If you want to do computer animation, that's another one. But instead, we've completely given up pencil animation because it's so expensive. But there's nothing like the thing that I always use as an example is a friend of mine. His name is Larry White, a really good animator. He had a character from She-Ra named Cowl. And it was like this owl with these big, huge ears that would be like its wings. And in one scene, the cow came floating into the scene, like over here, and then it did a little back and then zoomed off, right?
Right.
So he drew it anticipating, and then as it took off, for 2 drawings, it turned into the space shuttle. And then it would turn back into itself. So that gave the idea that, oh, it's moving so fast, it's like a space shuttle. So it was really clever, cute idea. If you did that in a computer now, you would have to have somebody model a space shuttle in the computer that would take days for 2 frames. When he
Crazy.
drew it,
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. By the way, Monkey Jeebus has joined us. Have we had other people join us? Monkey Jeebus, thank you. Come again. Kingsport Cow was the last one, then Monkey Jeebus. So good. I want to make sure we say hi to everybody. We've had a great we have a great chat, by the way. The audience that watches us, very engaging. They've said some great stuff. I have some. Tom, do you have a favorite thing to draw? If so, would you tell us? And do you have a favorite classic animation or character that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think drawing wise, I've always liked Orko. And half of it is that he's that simple to draw and he doesn't have legs. So to animate him is really easy.
Yeah.
But I always like the character. So for me, that's something that if somebody comes up and says, I want to get an Orko drawing, bingo, you kind of hit me. I like
I'm sorry, CJ just said yuck. Yuck is your favorite character to draw.
Yeah. No, Yuck is just a doghouse. I do that all the time when I do Snoopy on the doghouse.
Right.
But doing He-Man and Skeletor is always great because the characters are so well loved, and I've gotten pretty good at doing both of them. And I'm kind of proud of that. That when people get it, they're like, "Wow, this looks just well." Yeah, because I did work on the show. That's why. And anybody in the Scooby-Doo gang, I enjoy drawing the Scooby-Doo guys. That's a lot of fun too. Some of the things I don't like to do are some of the peripheral characters because I don't know them good enough. And I like to get things that I know so I can draw it and go, ooh, that's not thick enough, or that part of his belt isn't wide enough because I know so well from doing it so often. Some of the things, they give me these obtuse characters that I got to look them up on the internet, and then I've got to choose what version of them I want to do, and that just takes extra time that I'd rather not waste. So it helps to keep it to things that I like to draw and I know how to draw without having to do any reference work.
Yeah. Are you pretty comfortable drawing freehand without reference work, or do you like occasionally getting reference work?
Certain things I'm not too bad at doing. I've always liked reference work better. See, as an animator, I learned to draw using a blue pencil and sketching something out really rough. I mean, so you almost can't tell what it is. And then when you see it move correctly, then you go in and fix it and make it look like the character a little bit more, and then add the details. I had a friend that used to draw everything in blue pencil, but he did all the details, and then he'd show it on the video and it wouldn't work right. And he wasted all that time putting all this detail in it and then just had to throw the drawings away. So I draw really rough, and then I will clean it up with a light board. So I'll take my blue drawing, put it down, put a clean piece of paper on top, and then re-ink or trace, whatever you want to call it. But I'm not tracing because I'm really picking new lines, but the basics are there for me. And then finish it off like that. Because in animation, you have to have this really smooth, perfect line. And I've always been able to do that. Even at 71, my line still looks pretty good. And so I don't like sitting at a show and drawing in front of people because I concentrate so much, I don't talk to the people that are coming up to want to talk to me. So long ago, I decided I'm just going to take commission orders, do it in the evening and bring it the next day. And then I'll color them. I've got Copic markers. I bring a set with me that I color them. So when they get it, it's going to look like almost like a cell from the show, but it's on paper. And I'll add some, a little bit of shadowing, a little bit of highlight just to make it look a little bit more than a cell.
Right.
But
are you comfortable drawing with an audience?
I used to be able to do it, but I'm not. I'd like to be able to clean it up. I don't like people watching me. I feel intimidated.
See, it used to not bother me. But then I learned that I have a technique when I'm working on things that I don't want people to know how I do some of the things I do. I learned that from Drew Struzan.
Okay.
He said, don't let people see everything you do.
Yeah.
Because it removes the allure and mystery of how you created what you created.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
I started feeling that way like you, to where I don't feel intimidated, but I just don't feel comfortable with people watching me do how I do it.
Since I'm cleaning it up on a light board, I don't want to have the light board sitting there at the table.
Right.
And having this real sketchy looking thing underneath that I'm cleaning up that's going to look great.
Yeah.
But when they see the sketch, they're going to go, God, that looks horrible. Well, I'm not done yet. Wait till I'm done.
There must be a certain pressure as well with a lot of people lining up. I mean, there's a line
also,
of people.
And I know there's somebody in this room right now that's heard me react to this. Like when I'm sitting there drawing something and the person that's commissioning is like pops in and goes, are you going to put and I'll go, I'm going to put it in there.
Right,
just wait.
Exactly.
I'll put it in there in my own goddamn time.
I had a guy commission me to do a Roger Rabbit. Okay. So I did it my normal way, took it back to the hotel, did it the evening after dinner, brought it the next day. And then usually I do it all in black line and then I sit and color it, because that I can talk to people while I'm coloring and it doesn't mess me up. So the guy came back and I'm coloring his Roger Rabbit and he goes, the gloves, you got the wrong colored gloves. So, well, no, I've got the right colored gloves. No, they're yellow. I said, no, they're actually more of kind of an ochre. It's kind of a golden yellow. Nope, they're yellow. And so shut up. And so he didn't want to pay for the commission. So I said, look, if you don't want to pay, that's fine, because I'll sell it in an instant anyway. So that's not the problem. But I said, that's like you coming up to me and saying, you've got the wrong colored blue for Superman's costume, and it's right. So why are you arguing with me? I can pull up picture after picture of his gloves and show you that they're the correct color, but because you have it in your head that they're yellow, and maybe in a comic book somewhere they colored it the wrong yellow, but in the movie, this is the color yellow that it is. And he finally took it, but he was like really disappointed. And I don't like that.
Over the color?
Yeah. I wanted him to be really excited. And too, with Copic markers, I got to carry a bazillion of them to cover every color. So some of the colors are almost right, but they're a little bit off, but not to the point where I'm putting blue gloves on a yellow gloved character. But that gets a little irritating too, when people are complaining about something that you really shouldn't even complain about.
Yeah, so they're looking for something to complain about, I guess.
Exactly. So I guess we'll go ahead and start wrapping up here. Before we go, I wanted to show you something, because I do draw for fun. Sometimes I do things because I want to. And here's a prime example. You can always tell if it's something that I enjoy because it's something I care about. Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
I did that. That is Drew Struzan's Christmas gift from 4 years ago. I sent that to him, and he sends me art prints every year. And I actually painted that for him and his wife. And it's, of course, Doctor at Christmas. This I did for one of our shows we do on Saturdays, Tom and Jerry. That's just showing my cartoony style. And then, of course, I love Captain Kirk, so I did this for myself. I just love Shatner.
Nice.
Again, I go for these. It's kind of photorealistic, but it's not. And then this is my cartoony style when I'm drawing with blue pencils, and then inking it. So you can actually see my comic book style of drawing action.
Sure.
And what I've found, and I'm curious about you, is versatility really comes into play in making a good living as an illustrator, artist, or even as an animator. What do you think?
Number one, be on time.
Deadlines.
If you don't make your deadline, you're not going to get hired.
Yeah, that's why I don't like working with deadlines anymore. I'm old and I'm tired.
Almost no matter how good you are, if you're late, it doesn't do them any good to hand in something late. So that's at any time, like when I was an art director, everybody that was one of my artists that worked for me never came in on time. It's like it was pulling teeth to get them there by 10. And
but that's typical for young artists in particular.
It is. But I said, this is important for you to learn this now while you're a young artist, because this job is from 8 to 5 every day. And you're coming in at 10 and going home at 5. Because as soon as everybody else would leave, they would just say, "Oh, what the heck? Let's just leave." So they were working like 5 or 6 hours a day instead of 8. And I just saw one of the guys that I had this 23 years later. He was at a show I was at, and he's doing really well for himself now. And if you ever went to a restaurant and you see the little games they have in that machine to play while you're waiting for your food, he did the game Plants vs. Zombies. And when I first saw that, the instant I saw it, I said, "Oh, Rich did that, I guarantee you." And my wife was, "Who's Rich?" I said, "Kid that was one of my students back in the day." And sure enough, it was his work. And so he still has trouble getting in on time, but he'll turn in the work on time, but he just can't get there early in the morning. He just can't do it.
Some people just are never going to be a morning.
I believe there's a new term for it: time blindness.
Blindness. Oh my God, that video, that girl. Oh my God. You know what I said about that, by the way? I said, what they need to do is the employer needs to go, "Well, we'll pay you when we get around to it because we're time blind too."
That's right. Yeah.
See, what happened to me is because when I moved to Seattle, the only way that I would get work is on the good graces of the people in LA that were willing to put it in a box and ship it to me and wait for me to ship it back. And if I didn't get it back on time, the first thing they would do is say, "No more work outside. We're not going to let, it's got to be in the studio." So the pressure was on to be sure that thing, there's many a day that I was racing to the airport to get it on the FedEx plane to get it there on time because the deadlines were super tight anyway. And now you've got an extra day of shipping to me and an extra day of shipping back.
That's funny because I prefer having deadlines. I actually think they help focus you, because otherwise, if you know you have eternity to do something, you go, "I don't need to do it today. I can just kind of do it tomorrow."
Come up to me and ask me for a commission and don't give me a deadline and I'll get it done 6 months from now. Yeah, it happens all the time. I'd rather say, "I'll get it to you on Monday," and then I'll get it done.
Man, I'm so, I don't know. I've gotten old and just decrepit. And I just don't like deadlines anymore.
I still feel the need for a deadline. When I've got shows to prepare for, I like that deadline. Otherwise, if I know it's 6 weeks away, I wouldn't do anything about it.
Until 1 day before.
They are exhausting. But we're going to wrap it up. And what I want to do next time, Tom, and I would like to actually communicate with you on this, you, Keith, and I would like to plan out having you over and having 10 of your favorite episodes that you worked on. And we would go over those episodes during the 2 hours. Would that be cool with you?
Yeah.
Your top 10 list of favorite shows you got to work on.
Sure. And it'll all be for different reasons too.
I like that already.
Some of the shows I worked on, the guys that I worked with made it particularly good. And
we'll get good stories too. I like that.
The directors I worked with made a difference. I mean, I got some stories of some directors that, man, you just want to shoot them in the head. They were such a pain in the neck. And other ones were just,
metaphorically.
Not literally.
No, not literally.
Metaphorically.
One of those.
No cancel.
In a Looney Tunes kind of way. Yes.
In a Looney Tunes kind of way.
You'll appreciate this. The other day I said, sometimes I feel like Kathleen Kennedy should be dressed up in a harp seal costume and sent to Newfoundland. And only a handful of people got what I said. It was brutal. It's brutal what I was suggesting.
It would be a good idea, though. And plus, that would get me back into watching some of the cartoons I worked on because I haven't seen them in a long time.
Amen to that.
And
we will plan this out, Tom. I appreciate you showing up today. It's really fun, man.
Yeah, I love doing it.
Pleasure to meet you, Tom. Absolute pleasure.
You too.
Thank you for all those great memories you've given me over the years and great experiences watching.
All of us, man.
I really appreciate the fans because I was such a fan as a kid myself. So I understand what you're feeling. You know what I mean? It's like if I had got
you grew up loving Kirby and Ditka and all those guys,
if I had grown up and got to meet Bob Clampett when I was a kid, or
Bob
Jones, or And I got to meet them later in life, and it was just huge. But I mean, as a kid, I knew who they were, even though other people wouldn't have known who they were. I was such a fan of Looney Tunes that I knew the directors and who animated them.
Is it a surreal experience meeting them for you?
It's really weird.
Yeah.
Because they're just normal guys like you and me,
I got to know Drew Struzan and his wife, Dylan, personally.
Yeah.
And Drew, look, I bought Alice Cooper's Greatest Hits when I was a kid. I hated Alice Cooper. I was terrified of that guy.
Yeah.
But I got those albums because Drew did the artwork on both albums. Okay. And when I met him, I was like, I almost forgot to talk.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm actually talking to you.
Well, when I met Jack Kirby, that's what happened, is that I saw him coming across the bridge between the two buildings. And I said, oh my gosh, that's Jack Kirby. So I dropped everything and I pretended like I had to go to the other building so I could run into him on the bridge, and just going up and going, oh, Jack Kirby. Hi, Mr. Kirby. And he put his portfolio down and we talked for like 20 minutes and he gave me his address and his phone number. So I really could have become a good friend with him, but I was so intimidated that I never went to his house, even though he invited me to come over. And I could kick myself now.
Oh, kick yourself now. Yeah. Like, oh my God.
Shoes on the other foot now. How does that feel?
It's weird because that's how I can understand it. Because I put myself in Jack Kirby's place where Jack was probably saying, I'm just a comic book artist. What the heck do you want my autograph?
I'm nobody.
So, but that's true. That's what I am. But I understand because now I'm on the other side of the table and I did something that you really loved. So I can feel how you're feeling meeting me. It's just really weird that it's me.
And that's the point, Tom, is it's not, people go, oh God, you're such a fanboy and you geek out over meeting people or whatever, and maybe musicians or people like yourself. I go, it's not about, you say you're ordinary people, but you've made something we've enjoyed, and being able, that's a rare gift to be able to give pleasure. And I mean, in a good sense, not in some kind of perverted sense, pleasure to millions of people.
It gives him
life
great
is short.
pleasure.
Life is short, and to have something we enjoy and make, happy memories out of that. That's a rare gift, Tom. So thank you for.
That's why anybody that comes up to me, it's like I've just talked about this for one day and never before, because I want it to seem so realistic that I'm really taking time with them. I focus on them. I'm really good with faces. I'm not too good with names.
Yeah.
So a number of people have come back to a show like 3 years later, and I'll go, okay, I know you, but I don't know you. So remind me how we met, but I know we've met. And they'll go, well, yeah, I had this and I commissioned this, and oh yeah, okay, I remember now. And it's really very humbling to have people love you like this. I mean, it's really awesome.
And thank you for putting up with Gary as well. I mean, it's hard to do.
By the way, just as a funny anecdotal thing, because I've got best-selling graphic novels, I've worked on films and done all this cool stuff. I'm at a convention as an artist, and this person walks up to me and goes, Gary Cassell, points at me, and I went, yeah. And he goes, you founded Blade Zone. And I'm like, that's the most obscure fucking thing that anybody's ever said to me. Yes, I founded the Blade Runner fan club. Yes, that's me. I'm that.
Yeah.
That is so out of the fucking blue for me. It just blew my mind. I'm like, thank you. But Tom, I want to thank you for being here, man. And I got to thank our chat for being here. I need to get into the private chat and get all their names because our Muslim uncle was here. Assalamu alaikum. Anima Confisa, love of my life. E. Clay Thomason. Comic Relief Crusader, Boosh McFadden Penny, Slasher Fred, FKHC 2005, aka Tim, Brandon the Anime Guy, Veritax, Cam's Crash Courses, Peter Vinkman Fansite, aka Vinkman's Girl, Keely Chow. Let's see who else was here. Mighty Orbots was here. CJ with Action Grip, and I don't want to forget anybody. Kingsport Cal, and of course our dear friend who's hurt his back. Hope you feel better, Monkey Jeebits. Thanks everybody for being here. Tom, I will get with you privately and we'll talk about planning out that next show. We'll do it maybe in a month or two.
Sounds good.
Back because I don't want to inundate you, but I thought that would be fun to do an episode talking about your favorite experiences.
Can we nominate some episodes?
Yes. Well, I want to go with Tom. I mean, Tom first, and then yes. Okay. But Shinatsky, thanks for being here, man. You got some great questions. Brian, you're okay.
I classed the joint up. I know.
You're not great. Brian. You're not amazing, but you're Brian.
I'm adequate.
You are the shiny bald man. The shiny bald man.
Shining example to old
bald man. For being here, buddy. I want to thank Keith for being here and John. They had to leave. I want to thank the Comic Relief Crusader for popping in. And I want to thank Martin for being the right side of my brain. And Tom, most of all, thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you, Tom.
It is so deeply appreciated that you got to be here. We're going to do our outro. You don't have to leave immediately, Tom. We can talk for a few minutes after the show, but everybody have a great Saturday.
Those sons of bitches.
Ma, I'm doing a show.